Today is the 75th anniversary of NATO. There's a big summit going on, and all of the NATO countries are partaking in today. Anthony Blinken spoke at the summit today and continued the insane claim that Ukraine will be a part of NATO. He openly said it in his speech, saying, like, it's a given, it's going to happen. Ukraine's going to be a part of NATO. Absolutely crazy. I've talked about this before, how insane those claims are, and it's a declaration of World War III because they're saying that they want eventually a strike on NATO to be a strike against NATO itself, obviously Ukraine being a NATO country, but also a strike on the United States. So you're inviting World War III essentially because you've already seen how Putin reacted when even the possibility of Ukraine joining NATO was on the table. He invaded Ukraine. So if you're wanting Ukraine to be a part of NATO, that is a full and open provocation of Russia. And they know that. NATO knows that. The United States knows that. They're not stupid. This is deliberate. They want to put Russia between a rock and a hard place to where if they attack, then they can start a full-fledged war with Russia, pretty much start World War III. And then if they don't, then we have a reason to put our nukes on Russia's border. So it's absolutely crazy. What's even more crazy is the UK Defense Secretary spoke today. It actually echoed comments from the Polish Prime Minister, statements that he made last week, saying that we have moved from a post-war world to a pre-war world, saying like we've been post-World War II, and now we're starting to move towards to pre-World War III. This is just insane. This doesn't have to happen. Now NATO and NATO countries are openly and publicly saying that war with Russia is coming. It's inevitable. Fully saying openly that we're in a pre-war world is just absolutely crazy. This is not a path that is necessary. We can still steer off course from where we're going, which is World War III, but they obviously don't want to. NATO continues to choose the route of escalation in spite of Russia's willingness to come to terms. With NATO's 75th anniversary today, maybe it's a great time to ask the question, why do we need NATO anymore? Is Russia truly a threat, or does NATO exist to keep that threat alive? And what I mean by that is, if NATO disappeared today, would Europe survive? The whole purpose of NATO was to protect Europe from a post-Cold War Russia from just taking over Europe. I've talked about this before. But, Russia tries to join NATO in 2000, and there's not really a need for NATO anymore. That deliberately says there's no need for that anymore. And, post-USSR Russia, the West never gave Russia a real chance, right? They never gave them, you don't have to be allies with them, but you don't have to constantly provoke them as if they are still the USSR. Russia has shown no reason to think that they will just start invading Europe. And obviously when you say that, now people, the neocons have a reason to say, like, oh, look what he's doing in Ukraine. Yeah, I gave the analogy yesterday of how we provoked Russia into doing that. The threat in Europe is NATO, not Russia. Because we're keeping that fight with Russia alive, we as in NATO. If NATO disappeared and Russia was left to be, there's no reason to believe that Russia will start taking over Poland and then all of Europe. There's no reason to think that. The reason that there's still this issue is because NATO has constantly provoked Russia. NATO promised Russia and Putin that they would not expand an inch eastward when NATO was created. And what have they done? They've expanded all the way, trying to now get on Russia's border. So we broke that promise with Putin and Russia. So who's the real threat in Europe? Is it NATO or is it Russia? Because Russia hasn't gone and expanded all the way to NATO's border. NATO's expanded all the way to Russia's border, even though they promised Russia and Putin they wouldn't do that. They claim that they need NATO to protect Europe from Russia, but it's becoming obvious that the provokers in Europe are NATO and not Russia. Now, like I said, they're going to use Ukraine as a reason to say that, this threat is still alive. But anybody who has full knowledge on the whole situation and the history of Europe knows that NATO provoked that war with Russia, expanding NATO eastward and coming up on Russia's border. So this whole thing is crazy. You have you have NATO countries now fully admitting publicly that we are in a pre-war world. We don't have to be. We don't have to be in a pre-war world. You're the reason we are. It's because you're constantly provoking Russia instead of coming to terms and wanting peace with Russia. They don't want peace with Russia. There's no way to make money on that. The defense contractors don't make money off of peace with Russia. They are bloodthirsty and constantly want peace or want war with Russia. They don't want peace with Russia. That's why NATO expansion exists, because they all have to buy the defense contractors weapons and they make money off of it. So this is insane rhetoric. Not going to make any headway on peace in Ukraine when you have Anthony Blinken saying that they want Ukraine a part of NATO. So obviously, the message wasn't sent from Russia when they invaded Ukraine saying we're not going to tolerate this. We clearly are tone deaf, and we haven't. Okay, maybe we have gotten the message, but we choose to ignore it. I like to give them the benefit of the doubt that they're stupid and just haven't gotten the message, but they're clearly not stupid. So they have gotten the message. They just don't care, and they want war with Russia. This is insane. We shouldn't be in a pre-war world. You're the reason we're in a pre-war world. Everybody, average civilians want peace, but the people in charge clearly don't, and they're grabbing the holds of this war and keeping it going and trying to scare people, saying, "Oh, Russia, we're in a pre-war world because Russia is a demagogue. We have to stop them." And everybody with common sense knows who's starting that war. Who's the reason that we're in a pre-war world? It's NATO. It's not Russia. More and more people are coming to realize this. I mean, Hungary, yesterday I talked about, said that they're not for this NATO plan to keep the war in Ukraine going for 5 more years. Absolutely insane, when there's been many peace offerings on the table that we have struck down. So that window of peace in Ukraine appears to be closing. And what will happen when it's fully shut and Putin has had enough? He won't just strike Ukraine. He will come after NATO, I believe. He's shown restraint and hasn't done that, but everybody has a limit. And eventually, maybe Putin will reach a limit where he's had enough of NATO and the United States. God, please hope that doesn't happen, because when that does happen, then that's a full-fledged war. Like I said, he's shown great restraint to not do that, but every person has his limit. And if that window fully closes eventually to where peace in Ukraine is off the table, maybe Putin won't just come after Ukraine. He'll come after NATO and the U.S. He hasn't shown a reason to do that, but you have to wonder if the possibility is on the table still. If he's had enough of the United States and NATO not coming to terms with them and the window fully closes, who knows what will happen. And we have nobody to blame but NATO. And NATO members fully saying we're in a pre-World War III. That's essentially what they're saying. When they're saying they're in a pre-war world, because they said that we moved from a post-war world, which was post-World War II, to a pre-war world, saying that we're pre-World War III is essentially what they're saying. So you tell me, you see on the Russian side, you have Putin saying he doesn't want a conflict with NATO in the West because that would start World War, but yet you have NATO saying that we're in a pre-World War III world. So you tell me who the provoker is. You tell me who the problem in Europe is. Is it Russia or is it NATO? NATO is the one saying this rhetoric. It's not coming from Putin and Russia. They claim Putin is the boogeyman and Russia is the bad guy, but yet they're the ones saying this narrative. They're the ones saying this provocative narrative of we're in a pre-World War III world is what they're saying. So you tell me, you take that info and you tell me who is the real problem in Europe, because it's not Russia, because NATO is provoking this threat from Russia. They're the reason it exists. So it's great to revisit that on NATO's 75th year anniversary. Maybe they shouldn't even be a thing anymore. Maybe they shouldn't even exist anymore.